Myself 5 minutes. Director Young, thank you for being with us today. A couple of things. First of all, I want to, I have a graph in front of me that I would, without objection, would like entered into the record, and we will get a copy for this. But it shows the timeline of the actual passage of the American Rescue Plan and inflation. At its passage, just before it, inflation was right about 2%. The Congressional Budget Office basically estimated the pre-American Rescue Plan that inflation would peak somewhere just south of 3% and level out around 2%. And actually what we know has happened is that it went above 9% and is now back down just below 7%. It's still insanely high. But just to show this, that the amount of money that was pushed into the system has clearly driven the line, has clearly driven inflation to a 40-year high. Quick question for you. When you started early on, I think you were talking about the energy component, and you said that American oil companies had $200 billion in profit. Is that the number that
2022, yes, sir.
In 2022, okay, thank you. So, also, without objection, I'd like to enter an article into the record that basically shows that in 2022, Aramco, Saudi Arabia's largest state-owned oil production company, itself had $161 billion in profit, okay? So if I go back and look at this and I think about it, if American oil companies and those producers here in the U.S. are doing very well, and my gas price at the pump was about half and my diesel fuel cost at the farm was about half of what it was, I am much more in favor of those U.S. companies participating in that than I am Saudi Arabia. And so it just seems that the administration's policies are still generating, I mean, the world is still going to use fossil fuels. It's just, are we going to reward our friends in Saudi Arabia, or are we going to reward American workers working in American energy? You know, I go back to the day the president took office and he killed the Keystone Pipeline. And I'm just wondering if any of those communities have seen any of the green energy jobs that were promised. Okay? Not saying jobs aren't created somewhere in America, but when this place makes a decision to gut part of an industry and then leaves a community broken, and the response is, you're gonna be okay, we're just gonna give you a check. I think that's pretty cruel. I think it's pretty inhumane. I think these energy policies are misguided. And the fact that Saudi Arabia's state-owned oil company had $161 billion in profit, a record, I think I'd be looking more at that and how do we drive those revenues back to the U.S. than oppose American innovation, American clean energy, and American energy workers. I want to go back to also the conversation that we were having about the labor participation rate. And that labor participation rate is made up of people that are working part-time, full-time, seeking work, and it's low right now. And I believe that my friend from Wisconsin asked you, Mr. Grothman, about did the labor participation rate include those workers that were part-time or that would only come in and work 2 or 3 days a week? I am sure that there are people that have complicated issues with their household finances. But the reality is, and at least in parts, a big part of the 3rd District of Georgia, we've got a lot of people that will only come in and work 2 days a week, 3 days a week, whatever it is, because they simply do not want to lose those federal benefits. And it seems to me, and it's a reality. I've got my small business owners that are telling me this. And so I just don't understand how this administration can lessen work requirements for people to receive federal benefits. And let me just say this too, when you've got so much in the way of SNAP payments and food stamp payments, EBT, those numbers are so great. This story is told time and time and time again in my district, where they buy all the groceries for the month and then they turn around and sell the excess dollars for pennies on the dollar just to get cash. I mean, those kind of programs don't make sense. And I don't care how else you say it, it's a disincentive to work. So will the administration work with us to implement incentives for work that actually get people back into the business community to raise that labor participation rate.
Congressman, we share the goal of increasing labor participation. We have differences on how we get there. I'll point to one proposal we have that I think it tells the story. Childcare in this country. Women fell out of the labor market during the pandemic at higher levels than men did. And one reason they have told us that happened is because they don't have adequate child care for their families. We think that proposal is a good economic engine to make sure our labor participation rate goes up.
Reclaiming my time, that sounds well and good, except you're driving the labor needed for childcare out of the market by some of the disincentives. I appreciate your response. We have to agree to disagree on that. And with that, my time has expired, and now I will call on the ranking member